Hey guys, today I want to dive into one of the most important media battles that you probably don't even know is happening. The FCC, they're weighing in whether to lift a decades-old ownership rule that caps how many American homes that a broadcaster can reach. So, this is about controlling the narrative in a way. On the surface, it sounds kind of technical, but beneath all of that, there's this fight about who controls the flow of information in this country right now. That's something that affects all of us. Right now, you got the giants like Comcast and Disney, those people that you say their names and you spit, right? They're using that rule to keep conservative broadcasters small and under their thumb. So they're dictating the content. They're controlling the programming. They're punishing any affiliates that dare push back against them. And so how do we chip away at that wall? Lifting that cap would actually flip the power structure. So there's a battle in front of us on this. And it's going to give these trusted local stations, the Sinclairs, the Nextstars, it gives them the scale that they need to stand up to the national networks. Can we make something happen here? That's what I want to talk to you for a minute about and just kind of educate all of you on this, because this would open the door for a lot more conservative voices on television, the same way that deregulation once opened the door for conservative talk radio. And it would mark a major win for, the Trump administration and the broader MAGA movement, if you will. And so I want to break down a little bit with a little help what's happening, why that matters, and how this decision could affect all of us, and particularly the future of American broadcasting. So I want to get into it. My guest is Joel Thayer. He is the president of Digital Progress Institute. Welcome to the show, Joel Thayer. Joel, how are you, my friend?
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. Go Dogs, man. You know what? Normally I'm like, there's no way they're going to win it, but I feel good this year. I feel good. Speaking of battles that we need to win, let me ask you some questions here on this deal. Broadly, what exactly is the FCC considering changing? And why is that a big deal for broadcasting in America? Why should we even care?
Well, if you care about local news, you care about this proceeding. And if you care about unbiased news, you care even more about this proceeding. I couldn't explain it better than you just did, as to what the issue is. The issue is balancing the scales in favor of really not just local broadcast, but the average consumer. Consumers are begging for their news to be unbiased and actually something that is useful to them, and not just being force-fed by the coastal elites like you're seeing in the current market. Right now, you have folks like ABC, NBC, and the like putting their thumb on the scale on what average Americans are able to see and listen to. Not to mention, you're feeling the pressure that you get from large tech companies with the entrance of Google and Amazon coming in and also fighting for these ad dollars. These local broadcasters are basically entering a foot race while getting shot in the foot. And I think so basically what the FCC is trying to do is balance those scales. And right now they have they're considering lifting this thing called a national cap, which prevents more than two broadcasters from merging. But here's the thing: all of those rules were actually decided well before the entrance of large tech companies coming into these markets and into the content space. And worse, it didn't really take into account how large these other large national affiliates were going to get, how large Disney was how much of an influence Disney was going to have. I mean, you talk about these monumental mergers that occurred both in the Biden administration and the Trump administration. They are really up what creek without a paddle, these broadcasters. And we need to, and the good chairman at the FCC is Brendan Carr, is trying to figure out how do we balance those scales and how do we do it in a responsible way.
So you talk about a cap, if I read it right, I was looking at the article, is 39% ownership cap. If you take that away, it's going to consolidate too much power, right? But to support this, actually, it's that you would eliminating that cap. How does that influence get taken away from the Comcast and the Disneys of the world? I know when I walk into an airport, I got to see The View, if I'm in the lounge or CNN, they're constantly, I'm like, who in the world watches The View, right? But ABC and Disney, they got so much power. How does that take the influence away from them?
Well, who in the world watches Jimmy Kimmel? And yet we're stuck with that. So, so I think what you're identifying is the power structure and dynamics that are at play here. Right now, national affiliates like ABC and NBC have these things called affiliate agreements with these local broadcast stations like the Sinclairs and Nexstars of the world. And what they do is they basically leverage their market power that essentially far outweighs anything that Sinclair and Nexstar have to force feed their content and force feed their Sinclair and Nexstar's viewers to all the things that we just talked about, The View, Jimmy Kimmel, and whatnot. And the problem that you have is that Sinclair is stuck with this regulatory, I would actually call it regulatory arbitrage, because they're the only ones subject to this cap. ABC, NBC, YouTube, Amazon, they are not subject to this cap. So they're able to get as large as humanly possible to put their thumb on the scale again with on these local broadcasters, where the local broadcasters can only really negotiate so much because they just don't have the scale that these larger affiliates have. So effectively, what we have is one side of a negotiation having absolutely no regulation and are not bound by a public interest standard. Where at the other side, you have the broadcasters, which are stuck with this national cap and then stuck with a public interest standard, which means that they have to provide things, or they're at least obligated to provide content that is in the public interest. That is a complete win for the ABCs of the world, because they can basically use that in every negotiation moving forward.
So you take what happened, this recent deal with Jimmy Kimmel, right? You know, he makes the comments about Charlie Kirk, Sinclair and Nexstar, they preempt the show, but then they're pressured to put it back on. So what does that like say to us about this current imbalance of power? I look at like an NFL game, they still got the end racism stuff at the end of the back of the end zone. I mean, like, you know, it's like obviously they're getting pressure to keep putting certain messaging out there. You know, if a Sinclair and a Nexstar, if they got more scale, what changes in their ability to push back against these national networks? I mean, do they really get that kind of leverage?
It's a great question. So right now, the name of the game is ad revenue, and so ad revenue is basically dictating exactly what content is going up onto your screens. It is why it's such an important piece, or why the national cap is such an important piece of this puzzle. Whereas the YouTubes and Amazons of the world don't have this obligation, they're able to get larger and larger and have a larger viewer base, which attracts more ad revenue over to them and away from national broadcast. And then the same is true with Disney and NBC, where again, not subject to that cap, able to get larger, increasing their viewership, increasing their streaming markets, and allowing ads to be pulled away from other local broadcasts. So local broadcasts are looking at this and saying, okay, well, we can't compete with any of that because we're just going to be outspent. But if they are able to scale, if they're able to get a little bit larger, we're not even asking for a lot in terms of market share, even though just a scintilla of augmentation in their reach, you're talking about ad dollars that would now have to be that ad dollars they can actually compete over. And then that means that the power dynamics will have to shift, because now the ad agencies aren't essentially wheeling and dealing with these larger players to undercut all of these other smaller players like the local broadcast. So by allowing them to scale, they're allowed to get more ad revenue, and by extension, a better bargaining position, so that way we can get the content we want. And you pointed to the Jimmy Kimmel exchange. In that exchange, really what happened was a lot of viewers were pretty upset, and rightfully so, of what Jimmy Kimmel said about Charlie Kirk. And so they didn't want to see them. They didn't want to see Jimmy Kimmel in certain regions. So Sinclair and Nexstar said, we are responding to our consumers and responding to our viewers who said, we don't want to see this. But again, because Disney was so massive, they were able to push their way forward into basically leveraging other content properties they have, which is really the NFL. And almost from what we're understanding, they actually used Monday Night Football pulling on a Monday Night Football from all of those broadcasts essentially to get their way. And again, that means that consumers have to continue to eat it. So it's not just Jimmy Kimmel. This is larger than that. This is basically saying this is the fight at the end of the day is whether or not you want unbiased news, or and who will provide that to you. And it ain't Disney, it ain't YouTube, it ain't Amazon. Your best chances are to go to the local broadcasters who actually have to respond to their viewers, and they tried to and failed, mainly because they couldn't scale.
Hey guys, we'll get back to the program in just a moment, but are you watching the dollar lose value every day? Inflation, debt, uncertainty, they are eroding everything you've worked for. That's why smart Americans are turning to Birch Gold Group. With Birch Gold, you can convert your IRA or 401k into physical gold and silver, that retirement plan backed by physical metals. Real assets that you can know and trust are there waiting for your future. Don't wait for the next financial crash to wake up. Protect your savings today with Birch Gold. Text CHAD, I spell it Chad, to 989898. Get that free no obligation information kit to know how you can protect your future. Text CHAD to 989898. Yeah, see, this is some Gestapo bullshit going on, man. That's what that is. I mean, you look at that, you would think, you look at how conservative voices on, say, like AM radio, on terrestrial radio, like it's massive. I mean, Rush Limbaugh, massive. The advertising dollars are going to go, in a perfect world, theoretically, the advertising dollars are going to go where people are listening, where they're paying attention, right? It's not about blue. Or I should say it's not about blue. It's not about red. It should be about green. But that's not the way these things work. So who's opposing this? Is this a far left deal that's putting up the resistance here? And I guess how outdated are the FCC rules? Because this has been around for a long time. What happens? Who's pushing back against this? Why wouldn't we just say, hey, let's give a free voice out there? Let's obviously it's agenda driven, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think it's the usual suspects whenever it comes to this. It's the people who are going to lose the most amount of money, and the people who are going to lose the most amount of money out of this are the Disneys of the world and the Googles of the world. They do not want this extra competition for ad dollars, so they are fighting back as hard as they possibly can. And let's be very candid. Disney and YouTube aren't really known for being friendly to conservative voices. You even heard the president himself when he put out his truth. He said that he didn't want to lift the cap, provided that it increases the scope and influence of ABC and NBC. But in all reality, keeping the cap in place is what's instilling them forever as being the arbiter of our content. So if anything, lifting this cap really does do a lot to rebalance the scales, not just for conservative media, but for unbiased media. I grew up I'm dating myself a bit, but I grew up when local broadcast was actually a trusted news source, and it was an alternative to CNN. It was an alternative to ABC. You got these affiliates that were actually giving real news, real-time news, and things that impacted my community. I grew up in Palm Springs, California, which was at one time a pretty conservative area. It's not so much anymore, and I think in large part it's because of the influence of social media. It's the influence of biased news from big media. And if we keep letting this happen, we're not going to have any red areas left in California, let alone the rest of the country. So this has to be stopped.
Yeah, and you make a couple of super valid points that I've said over the years. One, people should say, where do you get your news from? Local news. Watch the local news. You used to be able to do that. Now that's being controlled. And I think that if you were able to lift that cap, we saw what happened. I mentioned Rush Limbaugh. He was such a pioneer. There was suddenly this explosion of conservative voices out there on the radio and various places that were there. It led to so many different people who got a platform because of this. And I think that if you were able to lift this, you could see the same thing happen in television. I used to say to my friends in Hollywood all the time, this is a wall that I think can be pushed over or at least chipped away from. But let's say for the average person sitting at home watching TV, what difference? What is it going to make a difference? If you lift this ownership rule, what difference does it make in their life? And ultimately, what's the most important message that the FCC needs to hear as they consider this decision, and what can we do about it?
The most important message, if you really want to give the people effectively what they want out of their news, then you're going to have to make sure that you are increasing competition in these markets. And the only way to do that is to fight back on the big tech oligarchs. You got to fight back on the big media oligarchs. I mean, to your point, one of the things that we've learned just throughout this little experiment that big tech and big media has under us is that they are the captains of spin. Even reasonable policies that President Trump has put forward has been touted as some insane, crazy Orwellian agenda, which couldn't be further from the truth if you just actually had unbiased news telling you exactly what the thing does. And we don't have that anymore. All we have to rely on is whatever 60 Minutes puts on, whatever Disney decides is the most appropriate thing. Actually, what's most appropriate for their ad buys and who's buying from them. That is who's controlling all of this. And so the only way to push back on this is to have corporations who are actually more closely attuned to their populace than, let's say, Disney or somewhere else, and that would be the local broadcast. They have to be responsive to their population, which are the rural communities, which are the local communities, which are the mom and pops. You know who doesn't have to respond to any of that? YouTube, Amazon, Disney, NBC, all of them. They do not care about whether you like what they're putting on or not. This is so anti-consumer, it's bizarre. And so, if anything, I think the president has always been on the side of right on this. He pointed this out well before anyone else. This goes back to 2015, and now it's time to finish the job that he went in there to start, which is to give us the news that we want and make sure that even he gets a fair shake. This is going to be incredibly important as we enter into another political quagmire with the midterms. I mean, having at least unbiased sources of information is going to be the most important, because if you don't have it on your television, you're going to go to your phone. And when you go to your phone, we all know how that ends. So at the end of the day, this isn't just a fight for local broadcasters to have more, to get more money. It is a fight for our information. And ultimately, and I don't say this via hyperbole, I think it's actually true. I genuinely believe this. It is a fight for our democracy.
Well, we're already dealing with the brainwashed automatons who have been spoon-fed the jargon and the spin and the just absolute garbage that's out there. So anyway, I'm glad you're in this fight, and people need to put the pressure on here, and let's get this thing taken care of for sure. Joel, keep us posted on where this thing's going, and I mean, is there a timeline at this point? Do we know, as far as what people can be looking for and how they can apply a little bit of pressure here?
The short answer is not soon enough.
Yeah.
But in general, there are a few FCC proceedings that are underway. It's unclear exactly where the timing is, but there are some comment proceedings, which I'm sure I don't think any of your viewers or really any American is going to look at FCC docs. But if anyone is interested in getting involved, please have them reach out to me. More than happy to guide them and point them in the right direction. But really, just make your voices known. Get out there, start talking about this. This is a serious problem that we have in this country. Everybody understands this, and this is exactly what the MAGA movement is really about. It's about solving these problems with biased media and stop the brainwashing. And this is one way we could really level the scales.
Well, it's an institution that we don't trust, and we need to build some trust back into it. So, Joel, thank you for the hard work, man. Joel Thayer, we'll put your contact information as far as where to follow you and find you on social media down in the details of this episode. So he's the president of Digital Progress Institute. He's fighting a big fight, and I don't disagree with you. I think democracy is at stake, and think what we could do if we could tell people the truth without the spin and the brainwashing. So, Joel, thank you for your time today, my brother. Take care.
Preach, man. Nice to see you.
Take care.